Hello and welcome back to The Last Word on Spurs. Do not scratch your eyes. I am not Ricky Sachs. I am Matt Hayes. And Ricky is just having a few technical issues. He will be with us very, very shortly. But we're going to get the show on the road and bring you some updates on the latest in Tottenham's transfer window. If you are new to the channel, you can find Last Word on Spurs, the podcast version on iTunes, Spotify, and all major audio platforms, and as well on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Make sure to check them out everywhere to be kept right up to date with all of Tottenham's business. But the man who's going to be keeping us right up to date tonight is the fantastic Dharmesh Sheth, back on the channel again from Sky Sports to give us the lowdown on what Tottenham are doing. First of all, Dharmesh, thank you very much for joining us tonight on the show. How are you keeping?
Matt, thanks for having me. Shame Ricky is not here just yet, but I hear he's frantically looking for a microphone, so hopefully he'll be around soon.
He's scurrying around London trying to find something to get him on the show, but he will be joining us very, very shortly. But we are going to get the show on the road. And I think, Dharmesh, the only place that we can start is with Ange Postecoglou, the new Spurs manager, who has gotten his work underway very, very quickly. But he's been appointed the new Spurs manager, of course, on a 4-year deal. And we're just keen to get your thoughts on the overall appointment of Postecoglou, and if you can tell us how high up the list he actually was for Spurs.
Yeah, it's interesting this, isn't it? Because when Tottenham were looking for their new manager, I mean, it's obviously big news. And every day there seemed to be another name, and the headlines would be, this is now the first choice. You know, we've been hearing about Thomas Tuchel, Luis Enrique. There was even talk, are they going to go back and approach Mauricio Pochettino? Thomas Frank's name was mentioned as well. One thing that the information that I've been given anyway was that Ange Postecoglou, reassuringly for Tottenham, he was always on that list. Now, we will never be given information by the club or anyone else, really, if they were the first choice or not, because especially from the club, it's not in their interest to do that, because if they come out and say, yes, this guy is our first choice, and it doesn't materialize, then it's almost perceived to be a failure. But once you've got that list, you want to speak to everyone. And I think Ange Postecoglou impressed everybody at Tottenham Hotspur. And the fact that he was on that list full stop from the get-go, you know, he was in their thoughts for a long time. And I think it's also interesting how Tottenham approached this one, because since Mauricio Pochettino, I think a lot of the Tottenham fans, were the ones I speak to anyway, have been quite disappointed about how Tottenham have approached the managerial situation. And, you know, they've gone for who they think are going to come in and win trophies in Jose Mourinho and Antonio Conte. And it was described to me this afternoon as almost a scattergun approach. Right, this bit hasn't worked. We need to win a trophy. Let's just do that. And I don't think enough thought went into, what's the style of play going to be like? As long as we win a trophy, then that's fine. I mean, of course, the trophy hasn't materialized. Yes, Antonio Conte did qualify Tottenham for the Champions League, but I think this time the approach was a lot more measured and a lot more consistent and a lot more focused on how this manager would play and how what his setup would be, what kind of players he'd want to bring in, and the style of play that he would bring to Tottenham. And I think that has been a real big factor, because I know the fans, if they're winning, there's no problem, really. They say, well, we can kind of take the performances if they're not great, as long as we're winning. But once the performances go and the winning stops, then there's a problem. So I think they're just trying to bring back that feeling of, let's make Tottenham really good to watch again, and then build from there. Because I think there's a bit of a bridge maybe to be built with the fans after what happened last season, because there were so many lows. And the way the season finished, you know, no European football, I think for the first time in 13 years or something. Disappointing season all in all. So they'll be hoping that, you know, they've done their due diligence properly this time with regard to a manager and brought in somebody who is going to play, in inverted commas, the Tottenham way in Ange Postecoglou.
Exactly. I think the Tottenham way is the perfect way to sum it up. And it just comes down to the values that I think these managers have. And I've been critical of the decisions that were made for Jose Mourinho and Antonio Conte to come in and almost take a shortcut in going and winning that trophy and hoping that propels the club to where it wants to be, instead of building that platform to put us in a position where we can win trophies a bit more consistently. But Postecoglou's values, both on and off the pitch, from the incredible communication that we've heard from him over the last month or so, is definitely much more in line with what Tottenham fans want, and what I think we need more than want at this point in the crossroads that our club seems to be at the moment.
I mean, even the news conference, the first news conference he had, it lasted nearly an hour. He answered every single question, and even the tough ones. He knew that the Harry Kane questions were going to come. And he almost made light of it. We had a bit of a sweepstake amongst the coaching staff that what question would be Harry Kane's one. It turns out to be question number 3. And he was really light-hearted about it. And I think that's endeared himself even more to everyone who was watching. It was really relaxed. He's got a real nice persona about him, hasn't he? That just kind of like endears you towards him. So, I mean, that for a debut, as if you like, in a news conference as a new manager, I think it was fantastic.
100%. He's scoring brownie points, and he's winning the fans around the few that had some doubts there, which is fantastic to see. But he's also starting to build a little bit of a squad of his own, and changing the identity of some of the members in that squad. And the latest signing that Spurs made is, of course, Manor Solomon, who he signed from Shakhtar Donetsk on a 5-year deal. The 23-year-old winger spent last season on loan at Fulham in the Premier League, where he scored 5 goals in 24 appearances. And that, on the 11th of July, became Tottenham's 5th signing of the summer, with the moves for Dejan Kulusevski and Pedro Porro made permanent, and also the additions of Guillermo Vicario and James Maddison. What have you made of Tottenham's moves in the window so far?
I've been impressed, actually. And if you think about look, I'm not a Tottenham fan, but when I speak to them, there's lots in the office at Sky. You'll know some of them as well. And, all of the issues that they had with the team last season coming from the fans. And, whenever you watch the pundits, when they were on, they would always have here he is. Here's Ricky Sachs. And his mic's on mute. Classic.
What an intro.
How are you, Ricky? You good?
How are you doing? You okay?
Very well. Very well.
Good. It's good to have you here. Thank you so much. Apologies for being a bit late. I won't cut Dharmesh off there full flow. Let me just let Matt finish that question with Dharmesh there.
Yeah, I mean, like many people, I think I've been really impressed with Tottenham's early transfer business, because when you speak to the fans and you hear what the pundits have to say, and when they talk about what's actually missing at Tottenham and what needed to happen with that squad, he's already started to address it, hasn't he? There's lots of criticism about Hugo Lloris, even before he was saying, look, I don't think I want to stay. I want a new challenge. Everyone was talking about a new goalkeeper. Who's come in? Vicario's come in. Tottenham have got a new goalkeeper. There's too much reliance on the front three, or, if you're going to be really critical from last season, the front one in Harry Kane. Of the 70 goals in the Premier League, he scores 30 of them. Is there enough of a contribution coming from midfield? And then who comes in? James Maddison comes in. And it's not only the incomings that we need to look at as well, because, Tottenham will need to streamline that squad as well. And they're starting to make moves on that too. Harry Winks barely played for Tottenham, either been on loan or out of favour in the last 18 months. And they've managed to sell him and get good money for him, for a player that really was completely out of favour at Tottenham. So you just get the impression that incomings wise, they're making the right moves. And if, they can start recouping some more money from players that they don't want, and players that aren't going to get a look in, then that's only going to increase the budget for Ange Postecoglou as the window goes on, I think.
I just want to firstly say, Matt, thanks so much for expertly hosting us there at the start of this show. And Dharmesh, thank you so much for your time as always. We love having you on last one on Spurs. I'm going to take the heat off Dharmesh for a second and go to Matt and ask him about Tottenham's latest signing of this summer transfer window in Manor Solomon from Fulham. I think it's fair to say this one, it's on a 5-year contract. He's a player, looks like he may be filling in for, obviously, the outgoing Lucas Moura. There was a bit of talk, Matt, that this one may be seen as a club signing, as opposed to a genuine Postecoglou target. But we have seen, obviously, the interview or words of the interview from Solomon, where he relays the fact of the way Postecoglou wants him to play. What's your thoughts on it for you? Is this one that is more of a club rather than a real genuine Postecoglou target?
I think it's one of those that could be a bit of a happy medium for everyone involved. I mean, the first report that I remember seeing about Solomon being linked to Spurs was back in May, which I know, as Dharmesh said, Postecoglou was always on the list for the role, but at that point, we didn't know that he was going to be the next manager. So I think it's fair to say that the Tottenham's interest in the player does predate the appointment of Ange Postecoglou, and if we're going to be critical of it even a little bit more, we're signing a 23-year-old player whose value is only going to increase on a free signing. I know there will be some compensation paid to Shakhtar Donetsk for that move, but it is essentially a free signing. So in terms of the business investment side of things, it's a bit of a risk-free one for Spurs because you can't really lose money when you're not spending much money. So there's definitely some great sides to that for Daniel Levy and for the club. But I think even if you imagine for a second that Solomon isn't a specific target identified by Postecoglou, or he's not a name that Postecoglou put to the scouting team, he's a player that's very in fashion in the game at the moment. A right-footed left winger. They thrive in almost every team that they go to, especially in the Spurs team where Heung-min Son has been one of our key players for the last 5, 6, 7 years. Solomon can play on that side in a very similar way. Look at Postecoglou's team last year when you had Jota playing a very, very similar role, who was arguably their best player for the season. So I think it's one that Postecoglou will be happy with. And like you mentioned there in Solomon's interview, he spoke to the manager and the manager told him what he expects of him and how he can fit into this team. And it gives a little bit of competition as well to Son, who was off the boil a little bit last season. So I think it is fair to look at the merits of this being a club signing and maybe be critical of it in that fashion. But I think it's a win-win scenario for everyone involved here.
What would you say, Matt, just to fans that feel when you look at the way he played last season for Fulham, there was a bit of a natural dip to begin with. Then I think he scored 5 consecutive games in a row. Then after that kind of meandered. Do you think there's a case that if he's got better players around him, we'll see an improvement in terms of not only the goals, but also assists in his game? Because fair to say, although Kulusevski wasn't at his best last season, he's the really viable his front three, you would imagine, to really stake a claim on a regular basis in that lineup for Tottenham, isn't he?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it is fair to look at that record of Fulham, and if you take out that purple patch, it was a very disappointing move for them. But I think he had an injury during the season as well, and his game time was a little bit inconsistent. I think he might have scored a goal in the cup as well. But it's a very difficult step up to make from the Ukrainian league to the Premier League. And at such a young age as well, being thrown right into the deep end. So it wasn't an easy transition for him by any stretch of the imagination. But what he did show is raw talent that he has, that he's shown on the Champions League stage. I think Shakhtar Donetsk play Manchester City every season, so he's had a few chances to show them just how good he is. But he's a very talented player. He will need to step it up. I think if you're going to challenge Son, 5 goals in a season isn't going to get you anywhere near where you want to be. But if we're going to assume that Harry Kane is going to be in that team next season, when you have Kane, you have Dejan Kulusevski, maybe Son, there's a way they could play in together. James Maddison pulling the strings from a little bit deeper, and Bentancur when he gets back fit. You'd imagine there'll be a lot more on the other end of the pitch for Solomon to do on the ball, because as good as Fulham were at the start of the season, they did kind of fade away towards the end. And as a forward player, your numbers will drop from that alone. But it's a good sign for Spurs, and I think he is a player who'll be able to face that challenge and step it up.
I think it's difficult to judge Mana Solomon on last season alone as well, because I mean he had a few injury problems as well, and as Matt mentioned there, coming into a new league. Yep. It is always very, very difficult, not least the Premier League, widely regarded as one of the toughest and the best in the world. So I think maybe look at the positive side if you're a Tottenham fan for now, because when he did perform, he looked really, really dangerous. So they're probably thinking if they can get a good run out of Mana Solomon in the team, he can avoid injuries, then, it could be one of the bargains of the transfer window, because you're not paying any transfer fee. And I know it's a little bit, Shakhtar are a little bit
upset,
annoyed, shall we say, about how it's all come out, because the FIFA ruling with non-Ukrainian players in the Ukrainian league, they gave them an extra year to be able to move and leave their contract. But what that meant for Manor Solomon. He only had 6 months left on his. So that ruling effectively made him a free agent. Now, I know Shakhtar weren't too happy about it, and they were saying, let's hope Tottenham do the right thing, whatever they meant by that, whether they wanted some sort of compensation or not. But, this is not Tottenham's fault. That Tottenham have seen a player that they like. And of course, they're going to pay the market value, because if it was the other way around, I'm sure that, if there was a free agent at Tottenham that Tottenham didn't want to let go, another club would easily be coming in and snapping him up.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be interesting to see how he gets on. What we are going to do, we are going to go for our first break of the show for our listeners on audio. Taking into that break, you are going to hear from Tottenham Hotspur's latest signing of the summer in Manor Solomon, who joins us. And again, I must say a massive, massive thank you. We've got over 1,000 of you plus watching us live across all of our platforms. We've got the expertly hosting of this show of Matty Hose, who's going to end up taking this over. And I'm going to be out of it. It'll be Matt contacting you in due course, Dharmesh, rather than me. I tell you, well, way this is going. And join us as well. Really special guest we got back on. Love him on during the transfer window. We're joined by the brilliant broadcaster, journalist, Sky Sports' very own Dharmesh Sheth. I won't tell Dharmesh how many years he's been there, because I want to still make him feel young. But it was a pleasure having Dharmesh Sheth on Last One on Spurs. It really always is a true, true pleasure. Unfortunately, Dharmesh, I am here, so the interrogation will unfortunately go on. Hopefully, you'll forgive me in time. I think if we turn our attention to potential targets for Tottenham in terms of what they're looking at during this window, it was widely reported, of course, they were plotting us on a goalkeeper. You'd say they've ticked that box, they've done that. A couple of centre-backs who can predominantly play on the left and the right, and we're going to come on to that potentially. And along with, obviously, a winger that Spurs, you'd say, have now ticked that box in Manor Solomon. And as well, a creative midfielder in which, again, they've ticked that box in James Maddison. So really intrigued to know from you whether you feel Spurs are already addressing the key areas, and if there's still maybe a couple of surprises we should watch out for as this window rumbles on.
I'm just looking at some of the comments that are coming through on the screen just now, Ricky. There are no bad ones just yet, so prepare yourselves. Well, one of them... Dry roast peanut is there's some nice questions from him. My skin routine and how often I shave my head. Maybe we'll do that at the end of the show.
Yeah, we can do that. We'll do a roundup. We can do a roundup.
Yeah. Look, they are addressing the areas that we'd expected them to. We were talking earlier on about Ange Postecoglou and how he is actually reflecting what the fans were actually talking about last season and what the pundits were saying as well in the areas that Tottenham needed to strengthen in. Now, the other position, and look, don't at me here, but the other position that they will be looking at is a striker. But that is only in the small chance that who leaves the club. And I'm sure we're going to talk about what's happening with Harry Kane a little bit later. But this is not me saying, oh, the media are trying to sell Harry Kane. There's not at all. If there is a situation where he does leave the club, then it would be remiss and unwise of Tottenham from the start of a transfer window, if they find themselves in a position where Harry Kane's in the last year of his contract, not to look at other strikers. I'm not saying they're going to have talks with these other strikers. I'm not going to say they're going to buy these other strikers. But what would Tottenham fans think if Kane left and they didn't have anyone to come in? So they will be doing due diligence in the background. Of course they will, on all positions, including a striker. That's not to say Harry Kane is going to leave the club. I'm not saying that at all. I just want to keep caveating what I'm saying about Harry Kane, because I know that a lot of people are just like, why are the media trying to sell him? Not that at all.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that a situation would dictate a club to be looking at alternatives if the worst was to happen.
And I think it's only right. Listen, we are going to come on to Harry Kane, but we have left that towards the end of the show for the sake of the fact we don't want it to completely derail, obviously, the discussions that we're having here, because I think it's fair to say if we enter the Harry Kane debate now, I think Dharmesh will be like, I think I'm done. And we don't want that. So I think there's obviously a lot that we still want to cover. And obviously Harry Kane will be part of these conversations. But like Tottenham summer, what we don't want to happen is for this derail, obviously, what we've got and what we want to ask Dharmesh. So I'll hand back over to Matt. We know he's in the trusted hands of the man. Matt, over to you.
Look, we know it's one of football's worst kept secrets that Spurs need centre-backs, and Spurs need centre-backs badly. Just remembering a stat that last season we conceded and scored more than 60 goals in the Premier League. Just the second team to do that after we did it in 07-08. So we're smashing records for the amount of goals we're letting in at the back. But Spurs do seem to be focusing on getting those replacements in. And as we see in the chat there, it's Micky van de Ven from Wolfsburg and Edmond Tapsoba from Bayer Leverkusen that seem to be the main names there for Spurs. I think both really do fit the profile that I think Spurs fans would want in the centre-backs. They're comfortable on the ball. They're plenty of pace, good in the air. And Fulham's Tosin Adarabioyo is also on the list there, with Clement Lenglet. Again, another one that the fans might not want to hear, but you can't really rule out him coming back from Barcelona for a small fee after his loan spell last year as well. Dharmesh, do we know exactly where we stand on the pursuit of those centre-backs that could potentially be coming in? And with Tapsoba and Van de Ven specifically, do you think there is a possibility that we could get both of those in depending on potential departures for Sanchez, Tanganga and Rodon?
What I would say never. And what is clear is that, yes, the centre-back positions is definitely a priority position for Tottenham. And my information is that they want to bring in 2 central defenders during this summer's transfer window. That will, of course, mean, a bit of juggling with who's there as it stands and maybe moving a couple of players on. But, you've mentioned them there. Bayer Leverkusen's Edmond Tapsoba and Wolfsburg's Micky van de Ven. I'm told that Tottenham are in talks with both clubs over those 2 players. No bid as yet is the information we're getting, but the interest is definitely there. Tosin Adarabioyo, of course, as well from Fulham. He might be someone that they could get for a less price than the other 2. That he's more on the interest list at the moment, as is Clement Lenglet. You would think Clement Lenglet would probably be the easiest deal to do of all of them because, as Ricky rightly said there, it wouldn't command that big of a transfer fee. And the relationship is already there between Tottenham and Barcelona and Tottenham and the player. So definitely Tottenham would like to bring in 2 defenders. Are they going to be those top 2 targets? It's impossible to say at this stage, simply because the amount of money those 2 players would cost would go into, the late 70s, 80s for if you combine both fees. It would probably even be higher than that. And they're both really, really good players, because if they weren't, Tottenham wouldn't be after them. But by the same token, there's going to be a lot of other clubs who are after these 2 players as well. So it can't just be a case of once Tottenham go in for these players, they're going to become Tottenham players. It just doesn't work like that. And so Tottenham have to have a list there, like I just said, the other 2 names that I mentioned as well. But it seems that those 2 look like primary targets for Tottenham just now. Talks are continuing. If they were to bring in 2, those 2 or 2 from that list that we've mentioned, or 2 in total, which is what they want to do, then as I mentioned before, there is going to have to be a little bit of streamlining in that squad. It's not clear 100% who is going to leave the club, because it's not just a case of who hasn't been playing, that means they're out. You immediately go to players like Joe Rodon and Japhet Tanganga, whose game time has been limited in the last couple of seasons at Tottenham anyway. I think, was it Rodon was on loan last season, if
Correct.
I remember correctly, wasn't it?
Rennes. Yeah, that's right.
And Davinson Sanchez as well, not getting as much action as he would have liked. So with all of that, with all of those ingredients there will be some sort of streamlining in that squad. The only issue you've got with, I can't say for certainty, Rodon and Tanganga would definitely be out, because you've got the issue with the homegrown players as well. And they tick those boxes as far as Tottenham are concerned. So it's not as simple as, right, let's just get these 2 in and then we can get rid of the other 2. They've got to look at their squad and the makeup of the squad, and also the budget that they're going to have as well. And it's not easy simply just selling players. I know fans are just like, just get this deal done and sell him. It just does not work like that, because if it did, we'd have a 1-week transfer window and everyone would do their business. But players are on contracts, and sometimes they're on big contracts, and they'll think, I don't need to go anywhere. I'm being paid well here. I can fight for my place at this club. So there's lots more that goes into transfers, especially at this time. It's only about a month into it, and you've got to say that Tottenham have started it pretty well. But 2 central defenders, I think that's what they want to do, and we know the players that they're after.
Just before Matt comes back in there, Dom, I just want to follow up very quickly, just to kind of just pick up some of the comments that we're having here coming into the show as we go live here. From your understanding, and again, Sky Sports understanding on this point, has there been any personal agreement reached with either Edmond Tapsoba or Micky van der Ven at this stage with regards to the players and Tottenham directly, as far as you understand?
When you say agreement, is that you mean like with personal terms?
As in personal terms, have personal terms been agreed
see,
between the player
difficult.
and the club?
This is always very difficult. This is just generically on transfers. I'll tell you, this is what happens. Look, everyone talks about this, that poisonous phrase, tapping up, don't they? But you don't really hear that many accusations of tapping up, simply because you have situations where every club effectively will want to get some sort of encouragement from a player that they would be willing to come if a deal can be agreed. So, for example, if Tottenham spent a whole month trying to chase player X, for example, and finally agreed a deal with the club, and then that was the first time they talked to the player, and the player said, actually, I don't want to come. What would have been a point of that whole month for nothing? And you've wasted all of that time. So there has to be that kind of, this almost like, I would guess sometimes clubs might give permission sometimes. If they know that a player might be leaving the club, it's in their interest to get the most money for the player, of course, and probably to get it done as quickly as possible, because it's very likely they're going to have to bring in a replacement themselves. So they might, I'm not saying this happens, but they might instruct the agent of the player or the representatives of the player and say, look, you can start talking to clubs. I don't want the player involved because I don't want him distracted in any kind of way, but you can, just gauge what the interest is. And then maybe it would be, right, there's a possibility that the player would come, and this is how much an estimation we would pay. Would you agree to that? Yeah, if there was around that figure, we probably would agree to that. Then it would be in the club's interest to start the bidding process and start talking to the club. Because as much as that might sound like tapping up, it might not be at all. Because there might be a permission that would have been granted beforehand if a player is going to leave a club.
Yep. Out of interest, what do you say? I mean, listen, you're the expert here, Dharmesh. We're just, fascinated when we bring on people like yourselves that are involved in the industry and have an understanding over your great span of how many years you've done this, I think 20 plus years in terms of the world of transfers. What do you say to those fans that are saying, essentially, well, what's the point of talking to the club if you haven't even put a bid in? Is it one of those things that you're just trying to test the water to gauge? Is it inquiry basis, or does it lead? What would you say to fans like that?
Look, Ricky, I think transfers, depending on which clubs do the transfer, they work in different ways. Yep. So you might hear, for example, I think probably Liverpool might have been a good example with regard to McAllister, I would say. I think there was a release clause in there, but there was also, there was going to be additional payments, incentive payments, and all that kind of thing. But we didn't really hear about any of that until it was as good as agreed. Now, sometimes what can happen between clubs is a club might not make a bid at all. What they might do is they might just have talks, continue to have talks until they get to the point of, right, we have agreed verbally on a figure. Okay, then maybe that's when the first bid goes in. Now, if that first bid, let's just use, for argument's sake, Tottenham going for, I don't know, Tapsoba, for example, and they went to buy Leverkusen and they said they continued having talks with them like they are, and we don't believe that there's been a bid, and they will then say to buy Leverkusen, this is how much we would be prepared to pay. It's not necessarily a bid. It's just, this is how much we'd be prepared to pay. Bayer Leverkusen might come back and say, that's not going to be enough. This is how much we'd want. And then the compromise would start, because Tottenham will not want to go to the highest figure, and Bayer Leverkusen, of course, will have the highest figure that they can. And they'll only want to come down a little bit, and maybe they'll meet in the middle. And say they verbally meet on a figure. Maybe then Tottenham might then go to Bayer Leverkusen. Here you go. Here it is in writing. We want to buy Tapsoba. This is the offer, and it is, let's say for argument's sake, it's £60 million, of which £15 million are in performance-related add-ons. That might, even though the figure has been agreed, that's when a bid still might be rejected, because Bayer Leverkusen will say, these add-ons don't look achievable to us, so you're going to have to come back with another bid. They'll have more discussions and they'll say, right, we're going to increase our initial payment to 50 million, for example, and then we will do 10 million in performance-related add-ons. It's rather like what happened with, sorry, that's probably a bad example. I was going to say Manchester United and Chelsea with Mason Mount, but with that really did look like a bid rejected, bid rejected, bid rejected, bid accepted. But that can happen as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be bid after bid after bid after bid and then wait till it gets accepted. It could just be one bid that gets accepted because there would have been talks between the two clubs for weeks and weeks and weeks before they come to that verbal agreement. And only then will the club think, right, it's time now to put the official bid in on the table.
Really appreciate it, Dharmesh. I think that's a real good breakdown there for fans that, again, and us, I'll be honest with you, when we're lucky enough to have people like yourselves join us, it really does open our eyes as to what goes on behind the scenes, just to get a glimpse of an understanding. Because as fans, a lot of us are like, well, just pay the money, put the bid in. But when you break it down like that, it really gives a lot more of a concise understanding as to just the complexities involved in completing a transfer. So, Matt, I will hand back over to you, my friend.
Yeah, we'll move to the wing backs and the full backs at Spurs. And Dharmesh, as you said earlier, Tottenham without European football for the first time in over a decade. There's a lot fewer fixtures to share around in one of the most saturated areas of our squad, with Jed Spence, Sergio Reguilon, Ryan Sessegnon, Ivan Perisic and Destiny Udogie finally joining after that loan spell at Udinese. Tottenham reportedly could be letting Ivan Perisic move back to Croatia to join Hajduk Split on a free transfer. Forest, Crystal Palace and Fulham reportedly handed a setback in their potential quest to sign Ryan Sessegnon after he's had surgery on his hamstring injury and will likely miss the start of the next campaign. We've seen reports a host of clubs were moving into to try and get a deal done there if Spurs were willing to let him go, with Benfica and Marseille among a number of European clubs that has also shown an interest. Do you have an opinion on those who might be given a chance to show their worth in that position in what has to be noted a very different system under Ange Postecoglou to what we've played under recent managers? And do you think there'll be a few that we could see offloaded or sent out on loan?
I mean, it is a big squad. You would expect there to be some departures in those positions, particularly like you rightly said, no European football. So it's limited fixtures and also a load of players in those positions. But at this stage of pre-season, I think Ange Postecoglou wants to have a look at everyone. And it's not going to be a case of, right, I've decided already, you guys don't need to train with the first team because you're going to leave. I don't think it's got to that stage yet. He wants to have a look at everyone. So he wants to have a look at what Jed Spence can do, what Sergio Reguilon can do. Sessegnon, of course, is injured now. So that might scupper any kind of move, early in the window at any rate. And the other one, Destiny Udogie, I mean, he's just come through the door. So I'm sure he will want to have a look at him. I know he was, effectively a Conte and Paratici signing, but he's just Tottenham Hotspur player. So he's there for pre-season. Ange Postecoglou will want to have a look. The Perisic one is a very interesting one, actually, Ivan Perisic, because this is all coming from the player's side just now. He wants to leave. He wants to go back to Croatia. He wants to play for Hajduk Split. Now, he's got 1 year left on his contract, so he can say anything he wants. And he can say, I want to do this, 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 and this. This is in Tottenham's hands. Tottenham hold all the cards here. He's got a year left on his contract. So if and when Ivan Perisic is to leave Tottenham Hotspur, then it will be on Tottenham's terms because they are the ones who can make that decision. So I would say for the rest of, for all of them, in fact, I think Ange Postecoglou will want to have a look before he makes any rash decisions because he won't have seen them firsthand. He's only been there like a few days so far. So be interesting to see who does end up staying and who they will allow to go permanently, maybe loan perhaps as well.
Yeah, it's one that I think Tottenham fans will be keeping a very, very keen eye on because, like I mentioned, with that change of system, I think we're struggling to see which players can really fit in. And there's even been some talk of that Micky van de Ven move that is made permanent, that he could play almost as an inverted left back. So the good thing is that Postecoglou definitely has a lot of options there. And it's a position that you'd expect he wouldn't have to recruit. But moving a bit further up the pitch, a position he has already recruited in central midfield, where he's brought in James Maddison. There's reports and whispers that continue that Tottenham are interested in Bristol City's Alex Scott. And it's a name I think every day we're seeing a new club linked. What an incredible talent he is. I think Bournemouth is the latest one that I've seen linked today. Do you see any other signings for Spurs in that midfield area?
The other one that I've heard with Alex Scott was West Ham. That's come throughout the window. I think they still maintain an interest as well. Midfield incomings, again, I think the priority just now will be to recruit those two central defenders. That appears to be the real primary focus for Tottenham just now. But he wants to strengthen every single area, but while also looking at what he's got, because there might be someone who fans are thinking, no, he hasn't got a future here. And then Ange Postecoglou sees something and says, this guy can play exactly the role that I need him to play in this team. Funny things have happened, people who you expect to leave end up staying at the football club. But I think there was always going to be this issue with Tottenham and the big changes that they were going to have to make to the squad and to the team, simply because the way we discussed it just before you came on, Ricky, about the new manager and how they were recruiting the new manager after Pochettino. And they brought in what effectively were short-term winners in Jose Mourinho and Antonio Conte. Now, the danger with both of those managers is if they didn't work, they would have brought their own players in, played in a certain way that really isn't how Tottenham fans are used to seeing their team playing. So you then have a squad that's got players that probably aren't going to fit the manager who wants to play in the Tottenham way, in inverted commas again. So there's going to have to be that little mini overhaul as well. I compare it a little bit on a smaller scale, I would say Tottenham is to Manchester United, because since Sir Alex Ferguson, until Eric Ten Hag has come in, they've really been having that scattergun approach that I mentioned about Tottenham with a number of managers. It was like, right, we'll get someone who we think is exactly like Fergie or is going to be like Fergie. So let's get David Moyes. That doesn't work. Oh, we'll get the one who's going to win everything. It was Louis van Gaal. Oh, we've got the one who's been there and done it. It's Jose Mourinho. That doesn't work. Oh, let's change tack. We need to, someone who's going to be great with the media, who's going to be fantastic with the players, who's just finished playing. He'll be able to relate to him. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And then eventually that doesn't work. And then that's when they had to take the step back, rather like Tottenham did in this summer, which is why I think they did the right thing in taking their time on how they were going to recruit the next manager. I know there was a lot of dissent towards the decision-making when Antonio Conte left and Stellini stayed and he was in the job, and then he left and then Ryan Mason came in. And there was probably all of those calls of just get a proper manager in. But I think Tottenham probably did well just to take a step back and say, we need to get this one right. We cannot simply jump into that. And I think because of that, there was always going to be these big changes in the squad. And the quicker that they can do that, and the quicker that Ange Postecoglou can assess the squad that he's got, the better it's going to be for Tottenham, because they will need to hit the ground running when the season starts. That is for 100% sure. And I know it's a cliche thing to say, it's an easy thing to say, but now more than ever, just considering in the space of one season when they'd finish fourth, you are now looking at so many more competitors in that Premier League vying for those top four places. It's not just, Man City, Liverpool, will Chelsea come back, Tottenham, Man United, Newcastle, Aston Villa, they're doing business as well. Brighton, are they going to kick on again? So there's so many more clubs being able to do, who can attract players as well as Tottenham. So that's why I think that he'll look at every single area. You can't rule out midfielders coming in again. Not the primary focus, I would say, but again, might be dictated to if there are departures in that position.
think you're muted again, Ricky.
I'm laughing because obviously towards the end of the show, Dharmesh, I'm going to ask you what the hopes and aspirations are for the season. We're listed about 7 or 8 teams there. We've got to try and finish above, let alone what we might be achieving. That's partly why I muted myself. I didn't want to say what I was going to say on mute, so I'm glad I did at that point. But Dharmesh, it's interesting, isn't it? A new manager comes in, and as you mentioned, a lot of players, they get a clean slate, a second chance, and what I do love, and look, I think some of us are guilty of it being football fans, is the club on social media put up the videos of players appearing for whether it be their first week back in training, their first day, and we all turn into body language experts. We all look at what they're wearing, how they're coming out the car, what their mood is when they're talking to the person they're opening the door for them, and we've already made our judgment without them even being on the training ground. He's gone. Get him out. He's got to go. We're all terrible at it. One man that has always divided opinion in his career so far at Tottenham is Tanguy Ndombele. I have always been a firm defender in what a magnificent football player he is. And it is just finding the right man to get the best out of him. And look, he was signed under an attacking manager in Mauricio Pochettino. And then subsequently since then, Spurs have hired, really, if you say, 3 defensive-minded managers in Jose Mourinho, Nuno Espirito Santo, Antonio Conte. And we're just wondering whether it'll be 4th manager lucky and if Ange Postecoglou is the man to revive Ndombele's career at Tottenham. I can already hear the groans of people saying, oh, what are you on about? What are you talking about? But I've always maintained there's a player in there. And look, he spoke very highly of him last week where he said Tanguy's been good. He's been working hard in training, but he did caveat that and say, because he hasn't got a choice. So he takes things as he sees them. He was part of a Serie A winning side last season. He's been working well. Within that context, I'm pleased to have him here and part of the group. What that means for the long term, we'll see. Maybe he won't be part of things. So I just wonder, Dharmesh, from the outside looking in, from anything you hear around the football club, do you personally genuinely believe that Ndombele may be given that chance to resurrect his career in a Spurs shirt?
I mean, Ange Postecoglou is saying the right things with regard to that, and everything we've been saying about other players that we think are automatically going to leave. I don't think it's going to be a case of Ndombele, if he's straight away, you can train with the under 23s or whatever, which has happened in the past. I don't think that's going to happen under Ange Postecoglou straight away. So the issue that the Tottenham have got just now is it's a delicate time right now with regard to his contract. He's still the club's record signing, and I'm sure every Tottenham fan are just so desperate that it can still work for Tanguy Ndombele at Tottenham Hotspur, because when he has been good, he's shown flashes of absolute brilliance for Tottenham, but it just hasn't happened enough on a consistent basis. Or flip side, has he been given the opportunities to be able to show that on a consistent basis? But he's only got 2 years left on his contract. So I think some kind of decision is going to have to come quite early in this transfer window. The reason I say that is if Ange Postecoglou decides this guy is for me, he's got a future at this football club, then you're going into the realms of you're going to need to probably start discussing a new contract with Tanguy Ndombele, because you don't want to be in a position where, yep, I'm going to hang my hat on this guy, play him for next season, and then be in a position where he's got 1 year left on his contract. You don't want to be in that position. Or if he decides, look, it's not going to work, then with 2 years left of his contract, he's obviously not going to sign another one then. This would be the optimum time to get the maximum transfer fee for him. So I would expect that one kind of to come to a head. It would probably have to come to a head sooner rather than later, you'd think.
Yep. Can I just say, for the Ndombele dissenters that are watching this live right now, there's some saying, hold on a second chance and a new contract. Have you lost your mind? But I totally agree with you, Dharmesh.
I'm only talking about because of his contract situation.
Of course.
If he had 3 or 4 years left, you've got no problem there. But clubs have got to think in that way on how much value a player is going to have. Yeah. So that's the only issue that they've got.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? If he was to come in and do exceptionally well in that first season, I think it'll be a typical Spurs thing to then end up losing the player and then turning around saying, well, why didn't we offer him a new contract? So, Dharmesh, I totally agree with you. I will cover that and just say, I know, again, many fans feel that 60 minutes when he was in his peak condition at Tottenham is not the answer. But look, again, who knows? We didn't really see enough of him under Pochettino in terms of what would be a favoured manager playing an attacking brand of football to really judge him. So, I mean, again, I know many people feel he's had 4 or 5 chances already. But look, I think whatever happens, as we'll say a lot this summer, have to back the manager. If the manager feels that he is the right player for him, I think regardless, we have to back him. And I know that won't please everybody in terms of the players they're going to want, but ultimately, it's Ange Postecoglou's name above the door for now, and we're going to trust him. So, Matt, I'll hand back over to you, bud.
Yeah, one player who was brought in the same window as Tanguy Ndombele in a very similar situation, and that's Giovanni Lo Celso. Real Betis are reportedly looking to maybe bring him back to the club on a permanent deal, but their financial issues at the moment could make that very, very difficult for them. And Aston Villa apparently also interested. Of course, their manager Unai Emery had the player at Villarreal when they went on that fantastic run in the Champions League. Elsewhere in midfield, Atletico Madrid have reportedly opened talks with Tottenham over a move for Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, which I think is one that probably wasn't top of the list from a fan's perspective when the window opened. For those who could be on the way out, Højbjerg apparently wants the opportunity to join the La Liga side with them playing Champions League football next season. Do you expect either of those players, Dharmesh, to move away from Spurs before the window closes?
Again, I think Ange Postecoglou will want to assess them and see if they can contribute, but there just seems to be quite a lot of noise, doesn't there, about both of these two players. And if you look at how the team is going to set up, I mean, you'd probably be able to tell better than me, but watching them week in, week out and potentially knowing what Ange Postecoglou is going to do. But with Maddison coming in, Bentancur returning to fitness, and maybe Yves Bissouma, would that be 3 of the players that you would think would be in the first team for next season? What space then does that leave for someone like a Højbjerg and a Lo Celso? And if that is going to be the case, then are they going to agitate to move out from the club? I mean, Ange Postecoglou will always say the right things and will always do the right things simply because he wants to see everything that he's got at his disposal before he makes any decisions. He'd be a fool not to do that because there's so many players and these players are very, very good players. They just haven't been performing, or they haven't had the right manager, or they haven't had the right system to be able to do that. That's why I'm saying someone who you might think is a guaranteed exit might just fit into the way Ange Postecoglou wants to play. Look, but I will admit there has been so much noise about these two players potentially leaving again, as there has been with Ndombele. The Lo Celso one, the Villa one, does make complete sense simply because he's played under Unai Emery. Højbjerg wants Champions League football. He's not going to get any European football at all with Tottenham this season. So maybe is that a factor that maybe this is the right time for him as well? But I think Postecoglou, like I said before, he'll give them everyone a chance, but I'm sure he will still have in the back of his mind the players and the formation that he wants to play just now.
Can I ask you, Dharmesh, just to follow up on that, from your understanding and Sky Sports understanding, is there any firm offers on the table from Atletico Madrid or, again, Aston Villa, respectively, for Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, Lo Celso that you know of at this stage?
Our information, not at this stage, no. But look, that sometimes we will need to do a little bit more digging as well, admittedly, but we haven't reported anything with regard to bids coming in for Lo Celso or Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. But that's not to say that's going to change. Look, we are less than a month into this transfer window.
Yep.
You know, the clubs haven't even gone on their pre-season tours yet. So I think that will give a strong indication as well. Because, you know, we read so much into so many things. You were just saying little things like, oh, he's come out of the car, he's not smiling. Does that mean he's leaving? Oh, the manager looked at him in a weird way. There, why are they? Oh no, that doesn't look right.
Why has he tapped him twice on the shoulder? That's the common one at the moment.
And by the same token, you know, you can read a lot into potentially the squad that goes on a tour.
Yep.
Who is in and who is out, and why are they in and why are they out? Is there an injury, or is there something in there? We're going to let him stay behind so that he can discuss his future with another club. So then you know then that Ange Postecoglou's made his mind out about certain players.
Before I ask Matt a question actually on a certain midfielder, Dharmesh, from your understanding and from what you have intel-wise, I mean, Spurs under the last 2 managers definitively Nuno and Antonio Conte were in that situation where they did decide to leave players at home in order so they could sort out their personal moves.
Yeah.
Whilst the club were on a tour. I just wonder from you, again, you might not know this personally, but when you look at from the outside looking in now, a new manager in Ange Postecoglou that we've said is going to give these players, a lot of them, a fresh slate. And maybe not like the likes of Hugo Lloris that has obviously publicly said he wants to move, and similar to Davinson Sanchez saying they publicly want to move away. But do you expect the players, those futures were up in the air last season, been out on loan? Would you be surprised if they're not all on the pre-season tour and given the opportunity rather than being left behind? Or do you think Ange will have to be quite, I wouldn't say cutthroat, but quite clinical in terms of the players that he wants to take on tour? Because it is a fairly bloated squad. I think my understanding it's around 35, 36 players. Can you take everybody on that tour? It's a lot of players, isn't it?
I mean, you can, but whether he will or not is another matter. And there's still a bit of, when do you guys go? There's still
we're going to Perth,
week, isn't there?
Well, I think at the end of this weekend, they're off to Perth, aren't they? Harry Kane is now back in training. So I believe end of this weekend, they will be up in Australia. So you'd imagine from there.
Maybe that's not enough time for him to make decisions. But if there is a situation where, there are bids that they can't refuse coming in for players, because Ange Postecoglou will know, as much as I'm saying you want to give everyone a chance, he'll know that he has to streamline that squad as well. And if you're saying 35, 36 players, it's far too many. You can't go into a season with that many players. It just probably wouldn't work, because you're going to have players hanging around the whole time. And, and then stories get made up, don't they? Constantly, oh, those 5 players are training with the under-23s. Then they're away from the first team. And then suddenly that becomes a story. And I don't think he wants to get involved in any of that. No manager really would want to do that. So I'm sure he will start making decisions sooner rather than later, but that will also be dictated to by the bids and the offers that they're getting for some of these players.
Okay. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, one midfielder that has been linked, and Dharmesh, feel free if you've got anything to add on this. I know we discussed this off air briefly, coming to you, Matt, is that of Conor Gallagher of Chelsea. Now, I think it's fair to say and put it out there that Spurs and Chelsea haven't done business in a long, long, long time. Certainly, obviously, when you go back to the reign of Roman Abramovich, it never really was the case. I think you have to go all the way back, I believe, and people can tell me if they're wrong. I think you have to go back to 2001 when Neil Sullivan went from Chelsea to Tottenham. I think I'm going that far back, and feel free, guys, to correct me if I'm wrong. But off the top of my head, that's the last one really that kind of springs out to me. But again, feel free to let me know otherwise. Conor Gallagher, Matt, I think, again, a player that when you look at him, I think he's done fairly well when he was at Palace. But do you feel, Matt, he'd be an upgrade on the current positions at Tottenham, or in terms of the squad? Is he a real genuine first team player, or do you think again he's more of a squad player that gives you some depth in an area where you might lose a couple of midfielders depending on obviously what Postecoglou wants to do?
I think it might be a bit of the boring answer, but it could just be if he suits that Postecoglou style better. And I think there are some elements of his game where he does, and I personally would be not reluctant to judge him on the last season or so he had at Chelsea, but I wouldn't take that as the only thing we want to judge him on, because everything at Chelsea last year was completely bonkers, with the size of the squad even bigger than we have now, with the the managerial merry-go-round with 4 managers had throughout the season. I don't think it was a position where a club where any player could really shine and really thrive and show what they're capable of. Not to mind the player who'd been in Chelsea for so long, had so many loan spells, and finally got that opportunity to show what he can do. But looking at what he did at Crystal Palace, and even before when he was at West Bromwich Albion, I think after his 2 loan spells at each of those clubs, most Spurs fans would have been happy to take him at what he did there. And the game I always think of when I think of Conor Gallagher was when Arsenal went to Selhurst Park. I think it was about a month or so before we beat them to get that Champions League spot. Palace beat them 3-0, and Conor Gallagher was absolutely unplayable. He was all over the pitch. He was pressing like there was no tomorrow. He was that link-up man, really, getting Crystal Palace high up the pitch. Maybe that's a little bit of a clash with what we've brought Maddison in for now, but Gallagher, there's definitely a lot of quality in there, and a lot of heart and passion, which isn't what you're going to buy players solely for, but it's something you need when you're bringing players in. So I think it is an interesting one, and again, it just comes down to trusting the manager, and for all intents and purposes, Postecoglou is a huge fan and absolutely adores the player. For me, that will be enough to bring him in, because we can't make the mistake again of not backing the manager. But I can definitely see why some fans will be a little bit tentative to make that happen. I assume it will be a big price for him, especially because we're Spurs going to try and buy off Chelsea. I think we might see a change in how much we deal with Chelsea with the change of ownership. Now, I'm not expecting us to be loaning players every 6 months, but I don't think it's going to be as much of a stay clear of this type of business thing with the new ownership. But the main thing as well will be the fact that Chelsea need to sell players. They need to get people out of that squad. They need to get a bit of cash in. But it's an interesting one and one to keep an eye on. But I wouldn't be as upset with it if it happened as some Spurs fans seem to be.
Well, what I would say as well there, sorry, Ricky, what I would say there as well, we were talking about Manor Solomon and, judging him on last season, and probably that was a little bit unfair. Conor Gallagher, didn't have injury problems last season, but how can you judge anyone from Chelsea from what happened last season? I mean, it was a real mess at that club. I mean, we're talking about bloated squads. They were like, there were like 2 different training sessions going on. There were so many players. So is it fair to judge him? Yeah, look, he was still playing, so you can judge him on that, but possibly judge him more on what he did at Crystal Palace rather than last season, because last season it just seemed a real mishmash at Chelsea, and it showed in that where they finished, didn't it?
It did. What we are going to do, we are going to go for our final break of this show for our listeners on audio. And when we come back, we'll be diving deep into the Harry Kane situation, one we've tried to keep hold of until the end of this show. Again, a massive thank you for everyone following us live right now. There's over 1,400 of you watching us live. We're joined by the wonderful host, Matt Hayes, who took over the show at the start and rescued the evening. And he was joined by, he's been brilliant for us tonight. We've enjoyed having him, always brilliant when he comes on Last One Spurs, the wonderful broadcaster journalist, the superb Dharmesh Sheth of Sky Sports. A man you can't get off your TV at the moment. I'm sure everybody is on Sky Sports News wondering what's going on with their football clubs. Look, we know it's not only Tottenham fans that watch Last One on Spurs. We're humbled to have a really big audience outside of Spurs fans. So again, thank you so much for all of your incredible support. We've been really, really humbled, and again, can't thank you enough. Before we touch on Harry, Tottenham's captain, it'll be interesting to know what's going on with him. He has publicly said he wants to move. So I'm going to hand back over to Matt before we talk about Harry. So Matt, I'll hand back over to you, bud.
Sorry, I think my connection dropped there for a second. Are we on Lloris?
We've got you. Yeah.
Perfect.
It is Lloris.
Apologies.
It is
Apologies.
No
yes, Lloris. The Spurs captain has spoken of his desire for other things, and is looking at maybe life away from Tottenham Hotspur. And I think one that the majority of those in and around the club would agree is probably the right decision to come to this summer. It's the end of an era, but with Guglielmo Vicario coming in, we have options, and Lloris is understood to have some offers to move away from the club. Dharmesh, do you have any idea where Lloris might end up, or is it very much just an open opportunity at this point?
Yeah, it looks open at the moment. There's talk of Paris Saint-Germain maybe even being interested in Hugo Lloris, but the direction of travel would suggest that, he's probably played his last game at Tottenham. 1 year left on his contract. It'd be interesting to see how this one transpires, though, because, you saw at Chelsea with Cesar Azpilicueta, he had 1 year left, great servant for Chelsea, and they negotiated the termination of that final year of his contract so that he could become a free agent and then go on to Atletico Madrid. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Hugo Lloris, but by the same token, he's been a great servant and he's been there for many, many years at Tottenham Hotspur. I just wonder whether Tottenham would contemplate doing something like that, or he can still offer something very big for a very big team, you would say. He's only just retired from international football in the last year, and whether Tottenham would actually command a transfer fee for Hugo Lloris with 1 year left on his contract. It's clear that the Tottenham hold the cards, but they are preparing, obviously, for life after Hugo Lloris with the signing of Vicario, who do you expect probably to come in as the number one, and then you have to see where Hugo Lloris was going to go. But the direction of travel, as I said before, would suggest that he'd be leaving.
I think
we are approaching. Go on, Matt. Sorry.
I was going to say, on the point of goalkeepers, the Elves have been working hard behind the scenes, and the last deal between Chelsea and Tottenham was actually Carlo Cudicini in January of 2009.
Okay. There we go. Blimey. Okay.
Brush off that knowledge, Ricky.
All I would say on that, Matt, I think he was on a free transfer, which is why I didn't want to rock the boat. I think free transfer.
Okay.
So I'm going to push back a little bit. Is that free transfer? It'll count, Matt. I'll give you that one. I will give
Oh,
you that
no,
one.
that doesn't count. That doesn't count.
Doesn't count.
But it was in January, wasn't it? It wasn't like an end of contract thing.
Oh, right.
Really? Okay.
Oh, so if it was an end of contract thing, then it's not between the two clubs. But free transfer in January, then there was business between the two clubs.
Well, at least Dharmesh tried to take us to VAR there, didn't he? At least he tried to take me to VAR there.
I don't know what the decision is, yeah.
we all don't, Dharmesh. That's the bloody problem with that system. Hopefully it irons itself out for this coming season. Right, it is time to delve deep. And I think everyone's wondering what's going to be coming out of Dharmesh's mouth now with relation to Tottenham's poster boy of the football club. Huge speculation, unwanted speculation for all of us Tottenham fans with regards to the future of Harry Kane. There's been lots of noise, of course, of Bayern Munich, where they reportedly submitted one bid, which was not backed by Tottenham. They submitted a second bid, which was reportedly not backed by Tottenham. There's been reports that they're preparing a third bid. There's been reports that also he has met with Postecoglou today. And look, Spurs put a picture out of Harry chuckling with James Maddison and Fraser Forster. Whether that's to kind of allay any fears of Harry wanting away, I don't know. All I would say from my personal feeling of this situation is that Bayern Munich aren't bidding for the player unless there's encouragement from Kane's camp that he wants to go. And that's my biggest concern, that ultimately, if Bayern are bidding, it's because Harry has shown an interest. So, Dharmesh, you've got the easy question, really, here with regards to Harry. What is happening with Harry Kane? What is happening with regards to his future? And do you expect him to be a Tottenham Hotspur player come the end of this summer transfer window?
This is when you disable the chat, right?
Is this where you go on to mute?
No. So look, the information we have on Harry Kane on Sky Sports News is as follows. Bayern Munich have held talks with Tottenham about the potential signing of Harry Kane. We're also told that the dialogue between the clubs remains open. Now, I'll come back to that bit because I think that's quite crucial why that dialogue is still open. However, you know, we're talking about when is a bid, you know, Sky Germany was saying that, you know, Bayern Munich have come in with two bids or 70 million pounds or whatever. Our information is from Tottenham is that there hasn't been a bid. However, what Bayern Munich would be prepared to pay, which is around 70 million pounds, it would just be laughed out. It would be dismissed out of hand. So that those talks have basically come up with that there's a huge gap in the valuation for Harry Kane between what Tottenham would want in any kind of transfer, even though they don't want to sell, and what Bayern Munich would be prepared to pay. Now, as far as Kane is concerned, significantly, he hasn't closed any avenues that are open to him. So that would mean, you know, staying, signing a new contract, or indeed going to a club like Bayern Munich. Now, we're told that he's also open to speaking to Bayern Munich if the two clubs agree a deal. Now, this is quite interesting because at the moment, Tottenham hold all the cards here. I know he's only got 1 year left on his contract and the power starts going towards the player the later in his contract and the later in that year he goes. The fact of the matter is Tottenham have Harry Kane under contract. And so unless they agree a deal, Harry Kane can't do anything. But if they do, then it's quite significant that for the first time, I think it'll probably be in about 5 years, Harry Kane will have a decision to make about what he does. Because as much as there's been so much talk about whether Harry Kane was going to stay or not at Tottenham, particularly 2 summers ago when Manchester City were really, really pushing to sign him, it was never his decision. It was never, ever his decision because A, he was still under contract, and B, Tottenham Hotspur did not agree a fee with anyone. However, if they were to agree something with Bayern Munich, then the decision goes to Harry Kane. He doesn't necessarily have to leave. He's just saying that all avenues are potentially open. Now, I just want to go back to what I said about why, if Tottenham have got no intention of selling, he's not for sale, they don't want to lose Harry Kane, is the dialogue with Bayern Munich still open? Now, the reason I think that that is the case is, even though Tottenham got no intention of selling, if in the small chance they do sell, they are not going to entertain selling to a Premier League rival. Now, the reason that dialogue is open with Bayern Munich is that if he does go, he could go abroad as far as Tottenham are concerned. But if he stays and he doesn't sign a new contract, then all possibilities become open. Within 6 months, of course, he can sign a pre-contract agreement with a club outside England. And 6 months further down the line, he can join whoever he wants, and all of the Premier League clubs come into play then for no money at all. It just looks like there's 3 scenarios currently for Harry Kane. He stays and doesn't sign a new contract. He signs a new contract and stays at Tottenham potentially for the rest of his career, or he gets sold to Bayern Munich. There doesn't seem to be another option just then. So that's the case from both sides, if you like. You've got to ask Harry Kane the question as well. How important is that Premier League goal scoring record to him? He's 47 goals behind now. Alan Shearer on 213 compared to 260. How important is that to him? We think it is quite important. But then you could argue he's only going to be 30 and his next birthday. Could he go abroad to a Bayern Munich for 3 seasons potentially, then come back when he's 33, 34 years old and still break the Premier League goal scoring record? So I think all options, as far as Kane is concerned, are there. I just think that Tottenham's stance is unchanged for now. The only issue that they've got is the fact that he's going into the final year of his contract. And that is something that Daniel Levy will have to weigh up. He didn't have to weigh that up 2 seasons ago because he could fall back on the fact that Harry Kane is staying because he's got 3 years left on his contract. We don't have to do anything. The only issue he's got this time is he's entering the final year of his contract. Now, there is a 4th option that I didn't mention, which is he doesn't sign a new contract and he stays. But who's to say that in that season that he's at Tottenham, he doesn't see enough ambition and enough quality from the players that have come and from the manager that he's playing under to make him think, do you know what? This is the place that I want to be. And I can maybe sign that contract mid-season next season. But that would be like a real big risk for Tottenham Hotspur to take, because if you're going into, if September the 1st has arrived at 11 p.m. and Harry Kane has not left the club and he hasn't signed a new contract, then, it's jeopardy time, basically, as far as Tottenham are concerned.
I am conscious of time. I'm taking over the hour mark, Dharmesh. I wouldn't want to do that to you, but I just have got one follow-up question, if you don't mind. And obviously, I'm sure Matt's going to close it on this, on where we are, as we always do with our final question. You've covered some of the most high-profile transfers in the last 15, 20 years via Sky and what you do day-to-day in terms of the transfer world. Do you think there needs to be some form of a deadline put on this by Tottenham where this doesn't allow to derail this upcoming season? Because, and you look back to Nuno, similar to Postecoglou, one of the first questions he was asked was, along with what's it like to be the Tottenham manager, is Harry Kane going to stay at the football club? And my concern is that we're in a situation yet again under a new manager where a player's future is overshadowing and overriding a summer and could derail us. We've been there under Bale, we've been there under Modric, Keane, Berbatov. You go back, there's been so many high-profile players that have left this club. Carrick, when you go even further back, where a player situation has completely overshadowed the season, the start of it, and affected Tottenham on the pitch. So I just wonder, from your perspective, do you think you'll be covering Harry Kane's potential move, non-move until the deadline day? Or do you think personally we'll see this sorted out one way or another before the start of the season potentially? What's your gut on that?
That's a good question. I think, as you say, Tottenham will want it sorted one way or the other early, because if he does go, they're going to need to bring 1 or 2 players in to replace. I mean, how do you replace him? Is the big question. So I think privately, I'm sure there will be conversations going on at Tottenham, even though the clarity is that he's not going to go anywhere. But yes, that Ange Postecoglou will want that sorted one way or another as early as possible. But I think the difference this time compared to 2 seasons ago is Of course, yeah, he's going to the final year of his contract, which is not in Tottenham's favour. But it was a little bit bitter 2 summers ago, and there was pushback from the crowd as well. You never thought you'd see the crowd turning against Harry Kane, particularly in those first few games of that season. I mean, you guys were there.
I agree. That Man City game, I remember Spurs fans saying, "Are you watching Harry Kane?"
Yeah,
Spurs beat Man City under Nuno's first game. It was incredible, really.
Exactly. And I just think that doesn't seem to be the vibe this time at all. Only because, as you mentioned there, Harry Kane's first day of training, he's there. He's smiling away with James Maddison and Fraser Forster. He's there. So there hasn't been all of that kind of build up ahead of, is he going to turn up to training or is he not? So I'm sure Harry Kane will regret what happened 2 summers ago, because I think there's a big mutual respect between Tottenham and Harry Kane. Look, Harry Kane loves Tottenham. I'm sure in an ideal scenario, he would want to stay for the rest of his career and win those trophies at the club. But of course he would. But he's got to think about not only what he's done for Tottenham, but for his own career as well. I've spoken to lots of Tottenham fans about this. This conversation gets talked about, in the office, when I'm going out with mates who are Tottenham fans all of the time. And whereas before it would be, no, you can't sell him, no chance. Harry Kane, he's got to stay at Tottenham. Now it's like, would I want him to stay? Of course, I want Harry Kane to stay. He's our best player. He scores all our goals. We want him to stay. We don't want to sell him. We want him to sign a new contract. Stay here until you're 50, Harry. But some of them are saying, but if he did go, I wouldn't begrudge him, because he's been through so many rebuilds at Tottenham. Can he go through yet another one when he's approaching 30? Because this next move or non-move that he makes is going to be the last big one, you'd have to say, in his career. He's got to get it right.
Dharmesh, thank you. Not an easy subject to tackle. One that, look, it feels like it may go on a bit longer, to the frustration of us Tottenham fans. The interrogation is coming towards an end. Matt, I'm going to hand over to you, my friend.
My 2 favourite questions. Almost the only reason I come on these shows is to get to ask these 2.
Oh, that's good to
know. Dharmesh, the journalists always love answering these ones. Firstly, what do you feel would constitute success for Spurs and Ange Postecoglou's first season at the helm? And the second one, the golden question, how many players do you think Tottenham will sign between now and the window slamming shut at the end of August?
Top 6 and 3.
Oh, no hesitation there.
That's a man that they're prepared, wasn't it?
That doesn't happen often.
That was just stupid bravado. That's going to come back.
That's a man that's on Sky for a very long time. That's got that lined up.
Yeah. But could I just quickly answer? Is it dry roast peanuts? Yes.
I will try and find the guy.
Yeah. So dry roast peanut. He just was very interested in how many times I shave my head.
Okay.
And I can reveal if I'm working, it's every day.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love it. I can't wait till the aggregators are putting that on Twitter.
Don't tell me the journalists don't answer the tough questions on Last One on Spurs. All right. Please don't. Dharmesh, lots of love for you in the comments. Do you know what's funny, Dharmesh? I'll make you feel better. When the first time you came on here, you told us the story, of course, of you and Maurizio in that press conference where listen, I think it's fair to say a lot's happened since that press conference with regards to that manager and where he's gone. And your love on this show, it's been, listen, we always say this, it's absolutely tremendous when we bring you on. There's so much love for you in the comments here. I must say, almost so much love for you. There'll be even more for you, Dharmesh, if you're reporting some more transfers for Tottenham coming the end of the window. Where can everybody find you, check you out? I can't believe they don't know where to find you already, where you might be giving us some more, hopefully, breaking Spurs news on more players coming in.
So obviously on Sky Sports News, the transfer show at the moment is Monday and Thursday nights at 7:00. And then from the 24th of July, I think it will be back to Monday to Friday at 5 and 7. And on my social media, on Twitter, at Sky Sports_Sheth. And it's the same one for Instagram. Just joined Instagram in January, actually. Wasn't sure if it was for me or not, but you can spend hours on that app, can't you? Just like, yeah, it is. It is. But yeah, they're my contacts. Thank you.
Dharmesh, absolute pleasure. Matt, starting us off on this show and rescuing us at, I say, a time where it could have all gone completely derailing with regards to what's happening with Harry Kane right now. Matt, thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. Always fantastic to be on here. And Dharmesh as well, thank you very much for your time and putting up with my attempt at hosting at the beginning.
It was brilliant.
Superb. I'll be out of a job the way it's going, I must say. Dharmesh, thank you so much. To all of you that watched us live here, over a couple of thousand of you in total. Thank you so much for all of your incredible support from Last One on Spurs. Listen, from the wonderful Matty Hayes, from the superb broadcaster journalist Dharmesh Sheth, make sure you do go and check Dharmesh out for all the latest football news, not just Tottenham. We'll be covering this window in detail. Guys, as always, please keep safe, keep well. We'll be back before you know it. And as always, come on, you Spurs.